Like all of you, I've been watching the news and watching what's happening in Ukraine. There's so much there to observe. There's so much there to try to understand. There's so many pieces moving that it can be overwhelming. I try to imagine the suffering of people who suddenly find themselves, still in their home, still in the city they know, but also in a war zone. It's something I've never experienced, something I've never seen up close. I'm and watching the responses of the world. It's overwhelming, as so many things now are. And then the other day, I was watching the news and something for me kind of pushed it into a different space. Back to back, I was seeing protests in Russia about the invasion. And then someone was talking about the Russian forces moving across Ukraine and made the comment that a decent percentage of those soldiers, at least on the first day, they didn't know they were in Ukraine. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know why. They were just following orders. They had no context. Are they keeping the peace? What? And so then I'm imagining that experience of walking across fields and through towns and carrying these weapons and not having the information about why or what my role is intended to be. And I found it particularly heartbreaking. Not because it's so inconceivable, but because it makes so much sense. We talk a lot about dukkha, and I think that I sometimes, for the purpose of clarity, or so that it's kind of bite-sized, I talk about dukkha in terms of things that don't matter very much, because we're saying, well, dukkha is this fundamental dissatisfaction, this thing that we carry around all the time. And I will say things like, well, if it's a rainy day, you wish it were a sunny day. And if it's a sunny day, you wish it would always be a sunny day. That's dukkha. In a way, that's dukkha, but it's more an illustration of how dukkha operates. That wherever we are, we imagine a reality that's different from the reality we're in. We carry multiple worlds. But that's actually a very simple one. The weather. I actually know what it's like when it's sunny. I can picture that. But if dukkha is this kind of dissatisfaction, then if we want to get serious about it, if we want to be honest about it, we can recognize that there are kinds of dissatisfaction that go really, really deep. So deep, maybe, that we can't imagine the other thing. We just know that something about this is wrong. There's a phenomenon, I think, when we come across someone or we know someone who is in, for example, an unhealthy relationship. Maybe it's just unhealthy, maybe it's dangerous. And because we're not in that situation, we think, well, why doesn't this person just leave? It's so obvious. They need to just get out. Or when someone is in a job that feels meaningless, or in a job that feels unethical. It weighs them down every day to sit in that space and to do that work. And we say, why don't you quit? Just quit. Just walk away. If you have a bad boss, why don't you say something? At that next meeting, you should just say something. It's satisfying to say that. It's satisfying to imagine that if I were in that person's position, I would just leave. I would address it. I wouldn't just stay. But that's a fantasy. Maybe in that situation I would leave. But the why is disingenuous. I do know why. And I know because everyone knows the experience of not knowing the way out. Everyone knows the experience of feeling trapped in something that's too big. Or maybe that's very small but doesn't seem to have any doors. You know it. I spoke to someone the other day. We talked about a lot of things. He was talking about things he'd like to change in his life. And part of it was a relationship, and part of it was work. And we just kind of talked about the state of the world. And then at one point, he sighed, and out of nowhere, in a way, he said, God, I hate capitalism. And we both kind of laughed. But then we talked about it a little bit. And he said what he doesn't have to say, because I understand, because everyone understands. There are systems that we are part of that feel so wrong. And sometimes we get inspired to fight. Sometimes we get inspired to push back. Sometimes we get inspired to change or to do something that minimizes that influence, but it doesn't change the basic fact that we're inside something that we didn't want to be inside of. We don't know a way out. There are financial systems, there's racism and the reality that whoever we are, we're somehow participating in a system that perpetuates it. Sexism. Whether you're the most privileged person in the world or the least, there seems to be no place you can hide from certain things. You can move to another country, you can change your name, you can change your lifestyle. And yet you're still doing it from within those systems, from within that world. I don't mean to say any of this as a, I don't mean to say just give up. We shouldn't give up. Recognizing those things, recognizing the wrongs, recognizing that thing that is off, and then speaking to it when we can, how we can, depending on who we are, depending on our circumstances. That's part of this too. That's part of liberating all beings. That's part of cutting through delusion. So when we can, we do. And at the same time, I don't mean this as a pep talk, though we all need that pep talk. Maybe another time. Rather, I say this today as a reminder about basic compassion. And this seal of dukkha. Recognize that when we walk down the street, that what makes dukkha universal is not just ennui. The person coming down the street from you, they're not in this with you simply because, you know, they also wanted a different flavor of ice cream the other day. They're in it with you and you're in it with them. Because in a sense, you're both trapped. Sometimes in the same thing, sometimes in something entirely different. You're both wishing for a doorway that takes you to a different place, where all this stuff that you hold, and we hold a lot, is lighter. In the Buddha's time, all this was framed in terms of samsara. It was that simply being alive was so hard that there had to be a way out. Not simply by dying, because then you could come back, but a way beyond that. Life itself was the trap. No one had any sense of how systems influence systems influence systems. Now we do. We're not necessarily more trapped, but now we know we are. That person walking down the street, that person in the opposite car, that person in the bank, that person in your Zoom meeting, in ways that you understand and don't understand, is experiencing some aspect of life as a kind of cage. If you're honest with yourself, even if you don't understand that person's life, you understand that. That to me is a heartbreaking but powerful way of engaging with this seal. Not just about what I want or what I don't want, about where I am and that place I don't know how to get to. stop there.